I want to like put ambition in people's hands, right? You say it doesn't exist. Like you're going to hold it and you're going to flip through it and you're going to see it.
We're going to serve ambition.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the BetaKit Podcast. I am Douglas Saltis, Editor-in-Chief of BetaKit. And by the time you are consuming this episode, BetaKit will have released its first ever print issue, BetaKit Most Ambitious. How did that come about? Why ambition? What is print? To help me answer those questions is BetaKit CEO Siri Agrell. She's also going to help me answer the most important question. How do you cop an issue? Let's dig in. The BetaKit Podcast is brought to you by Uber Canada. Did you know alcohol remains a factor in a quarter of crash fatalities on public roadways in Canada? Uber and Mad Canada are working to help bring that number to zero. It's never been easier to get home safe with over 100,000 designated drivers on the road. Uber is proud to support every ride that gets Canadians home safely. Learn how ride-sharing plays a vital role in the fight against impaired driving at uber.com/home soon. Siri, thank you for coming on the BetaKit Podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's been a year. I was waiting to be asked.
I made Satish wait 2 years, so like you're actually accelerating ahead of him.
That makes me feel better.
This is important. We have we're doing a thing. It's very, very exciting. It is at time of recording like a week away from people getting in their hot little hands. Delivery TBD sometime in between now and then. But for the people who might be like, wait, what's ambition? Print issues are what is BetaKit Most Ambitious?
So it's a new annual issue that we're going to do that highlights, our perspective on what we think is the most exciting work being done across the country. We really wanted to put some stakes in the ground, tell some different stories, and create a moment in time where, Canadian tech and Canada in general can come together around some exciting stories and some exciting innovations that are being built in every part of this country.
Okay, you had mentioned this idea of moment in time. There's a bunch of different ways that we can take that. I want to start with maybe the biggest one, with this concept of ambition, because it's something that we have written about on BetaKit in a variety of different ways, and maybe also Canadian Tech's weird relationship with the idea of ambition. This is something that we kind of address really early on in the issue, but like we should just even step back into the idea of like why ambition as a concept for storytelling. Why do we want to talk about ambition?
Yeah, I think it's a word that comes up a lot in Canadian tech, but not always in a positive way, right? It's something that we say we don't have enough of, that we worry that we're not ambitious enough, that things are getting in the way of our ambition. And I think we wanted to tell a bit of a different story, and the magazine starts off with that, right? That there's a story we tell about ourselves as Canada and as Canadian companies, and we need to start telling a different story. We need to start orienting around the big ambitions, the big goals, the big things that we know people are capable of. When we looked at other lists that are out there and other things we could do, there's lots of measurements around growth. There's lots of measurements around fundraising. But I think, ambition really orients around the what and the why, right? What are people trying to do? What are they really trying to solve for? And why does that matter? And when you set a goal like that, when you say my ambition is to, roll back climate change, or to purify the world's water, or to map the indoors, it's harder to like create a sliding scale on that, right? Yeah. When companies say the ambition is, IPO or, big fundraise, if you come in under that, it's still pretty good, right? But if you set a goal that's around the what and the why, you either reach it or you don't, right? And I think that that's what we're trying to get people talking about.
Yeah, and it's almost like if you start telling different stories of people's ambitions, you start seeing ambition everywhere, and then it rings a little bit more hollow when people say that there's no one in Canadian tech who might be ambitious, right?
I think this really belies the fact that there's no ambition. There's so much ambition in this country. There are so many companies that are doing incredible things and want to do incredible things. It was the hardest part was actually narrowing it down. And so I think if we establish that there's tons of ambition, then we can say, okay, what do we do to support that? What do we do to realize that ambition?
Okay. Is there anything this is going to be an annual thing that we're doing? We're kicking it off in 2025. Was there any extra spice to the idea, given what we've seen maybe from last year to this year in terms of the national conversation around, let's say the national hand wringing around productivity and whatever, to these elbows up moments? Or is that just another example of the fact that this can resonate every year and ambition is a like evergreen resource that Canada happens to be able to capture and produce?
I think that's what I love about it, is that it will work every year and you can cut it a million different ways, right? As we were packaging this thing together, there were so many different ways we could do it. There were so many different companies we could focus on, individuals we could focus on in groups. But absolutely this year, I think there's a lot more resonance to it. The first thing I posted on social media, in 2025 was called Canada Needs to Get Its Story Straight. Mm-hmm. It is a time, there's some urgency right now. We've been talking about ambition or lack thereof for a really long time in Canadian tech and in Canadian business. But I think right now there's a lot more uniformity of thought that like now is the time that we got to get our act together. We need to figure it out. We need to be able to defend ourselves as a country. We need to be able to compete as a country. We need to be able to like produce things for our own people in this country. And I think that you're seeing everybody really come around together around the idea that it's now and that tech's going to play a big part in that.
Yeah, it's really cool because like this episode will drop the day that we are doing our most ambitious town hall as part of Toronto Tech Week. And it's really cool to see how like a year ago, our first ever town hall was maybe a communal space for everyone to talk it out over the collective concerns of the country.
It was a bit of a bitch fest.
It was a bit of a bitch fest.
Yeah.
The lists were made.
Yeah. It was an airing of grievances.
Yeah. But this year it's going to be a bunch of like really cool, ambitious people talking about the stuff they're working on, the things that move them. It's going to be, I think maybe a little bit more inspiring to people in the room.
I really want it to be like a vibe. I think we use that word a lot, you and I, but
because we're young and trendy and hip and cool.
We're the cool kids. No, I think that that's part of what we do, right? We talk about ourselves as sort of like the storytellers of Canadian tech, the publication of record. I think we play a role in not just reflecting that narrative, but feeding into that narrative. And I think that, one of the big moments, for me and I think for you is we went to Waterloo, what was it, in March, to go see Socratica, which is this amazing, young group of people who are actually in the most ambitious issue. And they had this event that was like, it was a vibe, right? It was like a spiritual, reckoning.
It was like a vibe generation machine.
There was 5,000 people in like a hockey arena, like doing heart hands and just like feeling good. And I remember walking out of there and I'm like, I can't do just panel discussions anymore. Like this needs to be part of it. Our events need to make people feel something. And I think that, when I've been talking to people in the preparation of this, I want it to be the equivalent of that sort of like heroic drone shot, right? Where it goes up over the, whatever's happening. And you have this kind of rousing moment where you're like, fuck yeah, like, let's go. Okay. And so this is, I'm hoping that this town hall that we're doing, this issue, is sort of like the written equivalent of let's go.
Okay. You said written. This is important. The other reason why this is a moment in time is because these things are physically being shipped to people. This is, if you're not familiar with the concept, print is like paper internet that exists at a specific place in time. Is this our version of like we're really big into vinyl? How does the print component relate to that idea? Is it just a cool way to create a vibe?
I think it's a lot of things, right? I think that for me, I always try and think of in journalism, there's this idea of a through line, right? Like what is the thing that connects the dots all the way through a story or an issue? To me, the through line is like, we need something to grab onto, right? Canada needs an identity to grab onto. Tech needs a purpose to grab onto. Individual leaders need like a goal to grab onto. I think that, the role that I see BetaKit serving is being, a tether for the whole community, right? We are a place that people can gather, that they can hold on to, that they can see as their own. And I think the magazine doing a print issue for me was really like, I want to like put ambition in people's hands, right? You say it doesn't exist. Like you're going to hold it and you're going to flip through it and you're going to see it.
We're going to serve ambition.
Yeah, we're serving it to you with robots.
Do you want to talk a little bit about, so like my experience with print, separate from this issue, is very, very limited. Mm-hmm. Just some like zine stuff in the 2000s, which doesn't exist anymore, and you're welcome. But you have more of a history with the format, right? Right. So like, what does it mean?
Is that your way of saying that I'm older than you?
No, I'm just saying different career paths, different experiences. For people who might, I think when people get it in their hot little hands, when they are served ambition, they're going to get a sensation of what you're talking about, like actually physically. But is there, I think for some people, and like we have a multi-generational team at BetaKit, a lot of them haven't had the opportunity to work on something like this before. Does it mean more when it's like codified in a way?
I think so. I think you think about the written word differently when there's like confines of time and space, right? And I'm not sure that anybody other than me really enjoyed that process as we were pulling this together. It's hard, right? One of the things I've noticed about, people who have grown up writing on the internet is that their sense of story structure is different, right? When I started off as a newspaper reporter, I was a, journalist with the Globe and Mail and other papers for about 10 years. And we were literally writing, we were assigned in physical space. So they're like, you would have, 8 inches to write this story.
Measure
3
your
of those.
work.
It was actually measured. You're like, you have this much space on the front page, and then it's going to turn. And so we were trained to write for the turn, right? How do you grab people really, really upfront on the front page, tell them what they need to know, and so they'll flip to the next page, right? You actually have to physically get them to go to the next thing. And so I think that it makes you think about how to tell a story differently. I think it makes you think about the order of things differently, how it relates to images, where things go, what the order is. I find it really fun. I think it's important, but it was a trip, right? Like talking to our young reporters, and like I actually had to ask them, I'm like, have you guys ever looked at a magazine?
Absolutely. What are your favorite magazines?
Yeah. No idea. Like I grew up with that, and it was a big moment for me, right? Getting those Wired issues or those, Forbes issues, or, our new minister of AI actually had this incredible magazine back when I was younger called Shift. And that was like my dream when I was in university. I wanted to write for Shift. It was about like tech and digital culture. And so I think like I miss having those things. I think it's something that people can create community around, right? And I'm hoping that the people who are in this issue will feel a great amount of pride of seeing themselves on the page. And I hope that the people who aren't in it are going to be really, really like bugging us to be in it next year.
I think, yeah, that's going to happen regardless. But I definitely, that idea of, when we talk about BetaKit, and this is, I think this is something you coined that I'm just completely stolen, but I'll give credit back to you. The idea of BetaKit is a publication of record, a trade publication, and then the community paper. For me, like all the print things that I consumed, I know not even necessarily like publications or just experiences. It was the idea that so often we think of journalism now as a service, and it is measured upon like the quality of service and like who it's for and what it does, but it's also endless. The idea that the work could also be a product, and that it can be cohesive and come together. And it might age, it might deteriorate, it might get better, improve in some way because it's like fixed in that way, intangible, is something that's really, really exciting. And I'm looking forward to people bugging us to be in the next issue.
Me too.
Okay, but we should talk about the issue. Like, okay, we most ambitious. What is this thing? How do we go about it? People are going to bug us. There's going to be drone shots of celebration where vibes will be served left and right. I think it's probably worth talking about with this project, which in itself is pretty ambitious for a small, multi-time award-winning news publication. Some high-level goals. We wanted it to be memorable. We wanted it to be credible, inspiring and aspirational, authentic to BetaKit, and then like versatile. I don't know if we want to go through our whole like objectives complete. Oh, I think one of them was we also want to make sure we deliver it, which I think that mission accomplished there.
Fingers crossed.
Is there anything about that is like worthwhile highlighting, or is it just enough to say that we had intention with this? Because then I'm going to follow up with the most important rule that we had set, which really became like a watchword for us.
Yeah, I think that like it was an interesting process of developing it, right? It kind of started, and Satish Kanwar, our board chair, had this idea when I joined, right, of like basically like BetaKit Project X, right? Like we're going to do a list of some type. And at various points, it was called like the BetaKit 50 and the BetaKit 100 and the
number
BetaKit
kept changing.
75, right? And I think that, one of the important things was like getting away from the idea of a number and really focusing in on like, what is the thing, right? That we want to celebrate and we want to measure. We had a really great partner, throughout all this in National Bank, who really wanted to work with us to create something special and memorable that would create a sense of community around some of these companies. And so, Danielle Smith from National Bank like played a huge role in helping me sort of think through what do we want this to do and why, which was great. But I think, and I'm thinking this is probably where you're going to go, I think credible was the main thing for me, right? Like I think both of us, put a lot of stock in that, right? Of like our own credibility in the sector and in our careers. And so I think like the idea of like, are people going to open this thing up and be like, guys, like, come on, right? And I think that that's what gives me sweats, right? Of like,
absolutely,
I don't think people are going to agree with every choice. I'm sure people make their own list, which I want to see, right? Who do you think is going to be on it? But I like wanted, and I think we spent a lot of time of being like every single company in here, every single person in here, every single story in here is defensible. It's there for a reason. I can tell you exactly why we think that they should be included.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about that credibility in a second, because we did have like a mode to ensure that at least we're happy with it. For context, if you don't know, Siri and I make a lot of decisions by looking at things that we don't like, making fun of it, and then being like, let's not do that. Let's do something better.
Don't tell them our secrets.
No,
Douglas.
it's fine. They can't copy us. But for me, like definitely the credibility, I definitely saw that in a different way, because I was like, if we do these other things, we can have a process to make it work that way. For me, I wanted to feel like BetaKit. I didn't want it to feel like something that wasn't us. I think BetaKit as a vibe gets delivered across a variety of channels and whatever. And like the print version of BetaKit should be the most BetaKit-y thing in tangible form. And then I also like, the reason why I like the idea of ambition so much was that is something that we can do every year, because there's nothing worse than, again, the list, the top X thing that is just the only reason that exists is because someone needs a 2026 edition or 2027 edition. Like we have so much runway to do whatever we want every year to talk about ambition. But to make that credible, we kind of early on locked on this rule, and you kind of mentioned it earlier, of for what was included in there, we had to be able to articulate the why. Can you talk through like that why rule? Because I think in one of those early meetings in month redacted, so you don't know how long we've been working on this, just getting to that, like we must be able to explain the why of everyone here was like this clarifying moment and made selection choices or conversations so much easier. Or even in like when we're looking at the copy being like, did we articulate why this person, organization, whatever is
cool? And I think the important thing is it's not our why. It's not like, why do we think that they're cool or they're important? It's like, how do we articulate their why?
Yeah.
Why are they doing it? Right. Yeah. So, a lot of stories are like, oh, people have built this thing and they've sold this many, like, God, they have this kind of, recurring revenue. And I think it's a question I ask a lot of like, what are they actually trying to do? Like, what is the bigger thing and why are they trying to do it? Like, what is the problem they're trying to solve, right? You go back to those initial pitch decks, right? Like, what is the thing that you're trying to do? And so I think it was that, right? Like, do we understand why people should be motivated by this? Why should people care about this? I think is the bigger why. And it was really helpful because there were some that we didn't agree on. There were some that we were conflicted about. And then when we brought it back to that, like, is what they're doing important, right? Like, is there a big why that people should care about this thing succeeding? That helped us orient ourselves around like, okay, you can't really deny that that's a thing.
And in some instances, like not understanding that why or not being able to articulate it was actually a prompt for us to dig deeper. Because I think there was like some, like on the other side, like disagreements, but on the ones where we're like, oh my God, these people do this, like straight to the list, like right to the top. Like you should be included once we understood what they were about. But I think some people are going to maybe be surprised that certain individuals or organizations, or maybe not included. We should talk about this. There are very few VC firms noted in this year's edition of Most Ambitious? We want to like match to fit that to the why a little bit as a way to articulate.
Yeah, I think that like, in terms of our process for people to understand, like we cast a wide net to begin with. Like we looked at the whole sector and like tech in Canada is, companies and founders, and we write about them a lot, but it's also investors. It's also ecosystem players. It's, the category I call boosters, right? The people who are like sort of fighting the big fight. There's lots of different parts of it. We asked about all of that, right? We did sort of a call out. We did our own research. We had, really, really long list across different categories, including VC, including ecosystem. We went after science too, because, you and I went to go see Abcelera, which is an incredible company out in Vancouver last year. And they were telling us, this is right after Hinton had won the Nobel. And the Abcelera team member who was walking us around started talking about this guy at UBC, and she's like, he's gonna win the next Nobel for Canada. And that was actually a question we were asking people: who do you think should win the next Nobel, right? Because we were thinking like, should we, focus on the ambition in the lab, right, and in the classroom and in research. I think there's so many ways we can do it. I think coming back to the credibility, we wanted to make sure we could lock in on a set of stories that was hugely defensible, that we knew inside and out. And I think also match the moment of time, right? And I think for me right now, and for all of us right now, it's like we have to talk about the companies, right? We have to talk about what people are trying to build here. Not to say that all the other parts of the equation aren't like playing into that. But I think for this year and for our first one, locking in on companies and founders is where we felt like the most confidence that this was a great story. But this is what I love about it, is like next year, like maybe the companies all suck and VC really kills it. Or like maybe, I think like my one, the one area where I was a little bit sad to not have them in there was some of the ecosystem boosters, right? There were people doing incredible advocacy work for tech over the last like 6 months to a year, right? There are people that are really out there like fighting the fight and supporting, the potential and the ambition of Canadian tech, right? And I think that's, we can index on that next year. I think there's a lot we can do with it, but this year it's about the companies.
Yeah. If there was ever a year to make it not about money in, money out, but about something more, it was definitely this year. But I also love that like we already have, like that long list isn't one list. It was like 30,000 spreadsheets of hundreds of cells in each filled with like suggestions.
There's a lot of highlighting.
There's a lot of, oh my God, we got so good at color coding. Yes, no, maybes. I think, well, let's take a break and we'll get into this, because we should talk about who is included and how we group them together. And then you might see where our intention was with this. And you might even have ideas for what we might do next year.
This week's episode of the BetaKit Podcast is presented by Cisco. Cisco recently released its third Cybersecurity Readiness Index, which pulls data from 8,000 companies around the world, and this year's takeaway isn't subtle. Even as businesses race to adopt new tech to shore up their cyber defenses, most are still woefully unprepared for the threats that lie ahead. To explore these findings and learn how businesses can better prepare for emerging threats, we spoke with Robert Barton, CTO of Cisco Canada. Rob, thanks so much for joining us. So to start us off, what is the Cybersecurity Readiness Index, or CRI?
Yeah, so the Cybersecurity Readiness Index, and I'll call it the CRI just because it comes out a lot easier when you just call it the acronym. It's actually the third year now that we've produced this report. It's a survey, really, we've done of companies around the world. So we've allowed companies to respond to this, and it's a double-blind survey, so they don't know who's asking and we don't know who's responding. And they really are able to, hopefully in a very honest way, assess themselves. So they will be asked questions around identity, around machine trustworthiness, network resilience, cloud security. And at the end of it, we'll sort of assess a score. And based on their score, we can come up with a measurement of just how ready that organization is. And typically we'll put them into one of four categories. Either they're beginner, which means they're really, really open and insecure. They're formative, which means they're sort of developing. They're kind of getting things together, but not quite there yet. Progressive would be, this is much better. They're funding security, protection. They're building those defenses, but still they know they have open gaps. And mature would be they have a very sophisticated, very well-developed, and of course mature system where they feel they can actually not just protect, but also respond to attacks as they occur.
So let's get into the data. What do you think is the biggest takeaway from the 2025 CRI?
To me, the biggest takeaway is just how underprepared companies are to deal with the AI threat. I think we're seeing massive adoption of generative AI. And I think especially in the last year, companies are starting to get out of that sort of get to know you phase, and they're really starting to use it for business purposes. And they're starting to use it in ways that we would have never imagined even 12 months ago. And all this is great. It improves efficiencies, but it opens an entirely new threat surface that simply wasn't there 24 months ago. And grappling with that, how do you secure an entirely new field of battle? I think that becomes apparent in the report, just how few companies feel they are prepared.
How do you think organizations should approach AI as both a cybersecurity asset and a potential threat vector?
And that's an interesting question because it shows that we sort of have an AI arms race going on right now between the bad guys and the good guys. We need to use generative AI and all the power that AI has to organize and find patterns in data to defend against these kinds of attacks. And that's where it gives us a tool that we just never had before. Most organizations will have 50 to 80 different security vendors for every possible type of problem in defending their network. But how do you collect all that information together, make sense of it, and more importantly, respond quickly when an event actually happens? And that's where I think AI is becoming a very, very powerful tool. In a report, we showed that now 68% of organizations are doing that. They're starting to use AI as a defensive mechanism. And if you're not, I'm sorry, that you're going to be a very, very vulnerable target.
You mentioned this off the top, but also Cisco's data showed that only 3% of organizations consider themselves prepared. In practical terms, what does it mean to have a mature cybersecurity posture in 2025?
We always start with a security policy. That policy will be refined and mature, reviewed. It will be implemented. And perhaps one of the most important things is that you test yourself. I always liken this to when we're back in elementary school, they do fire drills. That type of practice scenario is what mature companies do for cybersecurity. You're preparing by running scenarios so that when the cyber attack happens, you don't have to pull the plug on everything. You have a team that's been adequately prepared for such an event. What we see when a real cyber attack happens is timing is everything. How quickly you can respond to the attack, find out where it is, understand the kill chain of the attack. That is the difference between an organization which will withstand it and one that gets taken down.
If so few organizations feel prepared, though, something must be getting in the way. From your perspective, what's the biggest barrier? Is this a mindset issue? Is it budget? Is there a skills gap? Or is it just how fast everything's changing right now?
When we look at the CRI, we can see that funding is still suffering. IT organizations are not budgeting enough for cybersecurity defenses. It's like buying insurance. You may not use it, but you're going to be a lot safer because you have it. And sadly, I think a big part of it too is complacency. People just feel like I haven't been hit yet, so I don't need to invest in it. The ones that tend to invest the most are the ones that just got hit and got taken down for several days. Their databases got compromised, or there was a ransomware attack and it became very well publicized. So one of our goals in this report is to just raise awareness that this should be a wake-up call. There is a lot of complacency still out there. And if we can just get over that, think about what it takes to get to mature and those steps involved. We should see overall postures improve over time.
Want to assess your cybersecurity posture? Take Cisco's Cybersecurity Readiness Assessment and get your personalized score at cisco.com/ca/cybersecurity-readiness today.
We're back. We talked a little bit before about our intentions, how hard it was opening ourselves up to Canadian tech and saying, tell us the ambitious people you know, and then spending a bunch of time in spreadsheets going through, learning and reading stories about them. At some point, the rubber hit the road. We had to pull these people together. I think, so that this is a conversation a little bit about the content of our most ambitious issue, as much as us making it, we should go through the categories. And I just want to hear from you, like one story, one individual, one organization, one company that stood out where you're like, fuck yeah, keep an eye out for those ones. That was so either indicative of the issue or just like a super fun thing that we got to add in.
Yeah.
And I will start with the moonshots, which was really cool because we were like initially like moonshots, big ideas, people trying hard. And then it was like, actually, we have enough Canadian companies that are trying to do stuff in outer space. Maybe we can just have that as a section. Talk to me about your favorite moonshot story in this.
I love just the story of moonshots in general, right? Because it's really a credit to us letting the stories drive the process and not the other way around, right? Like,
absolutely.
I didn't think that there would be space stuff in this magazine when we started this, right? Like,
it
wasn't on our radar. We weren't talking about defense
was
tech.
not on our radar.
We weren't really talking about that last fall. But we started, we asked for names, we started paying attention, we started making calls. The reason that Moonshots is first in the magazine is because of the story of Nordspace, which, our incredible writer, Isabel Kirkwood, talked to this kid. His name is Rahul Goel. My mom pointed out to me yesterday that I call everybody in tech kid.
Yeah, he's a grown adult trying to launch rockets.
But they're all younger than me, so I call them all kids. This guy grew up at Jane and Finch, immigrant parents, wanted, grew up loving space, right? Wanting to be an astronaut, and then sort of came of age and was like, oh, is that not a thing here?
Yeah.
He bootstrapped 2 companies to pay for building his own rocket. This kid is like, his goal, his ambition is to lead Canada's first sovereign space launch, which is something he's doing this August from Newfoundland.
Big ambition.
It's a crazy story. He's a lovely person. He's doing a big thing. He's doing it with like kids he met in like a STEM program in his like North Toronto high school. He has like kids across the country writing him letters.
Yeah.
Like, it's just an incredible story.
Yeah. It's a really great way to kind of kick this off. And I love that you mentioned like how much of this was us locking in on a process and then being open to being like, come to us, ambition, guide us. But there were a couple in there where we're like, when we conceiving of the issue, we're like, these guys got to be in. The CSMC, the Canadian Space Mining Corporation, was an early one.
That was the first one you said to me. You're like, these guys
nukes on the moon. Yeah. If you are trying to put a nuclear reactor on the moon to power spacefaring missions and make the moon like a lunar base of operations for the world, humanity to explore the galaxy, that's it seems like an easy green. But in this process, identifying Volta, also in that section, because they're like, oh, you want to put a nuclear reactor on the moon? We're just going to redirect the light from the sun
with lasers,
with lasers, and just charge things with these giant solar dishes. Like, challenge accepted. I think that was a cool one of being like, oh, there's got to be no one else doing this, and it's like, oh, there's another Canadian company trying to do this in a completely different way, and both of them are crazy cool.
We also found like 2 people that I don't think we would have ever found otherwise. Like Susan Scone was somebody who came in through asking who should win the next Nobel. She's a University of Calgary professor. She just spun out her own company. She stops satellites from being spoofed, like from being hacked, right? She's huge. Eula Sorok was a kid that like somebody, like the entire submission was just like, you should go talk to this kid, Euless.
Yeah.
And so I was like, all right, enough. Like, I think maybe 3 or 4 people said that. This kid dropped out of University of Waterloo and is down in El Segundo, California, trying to build self-replicating robots.
Yeah. He literally left his robots in El Segundo.
Yeah.
He's going to come to our town hall, which is happening today if you're seeing this. So race over. Okay, let's next section, the deep tech. This was another one that kind of emerged when we're like, there are a lot of really smart Canadian companies doing like bleeding edge stuff here. Is there any that specific company that stood out for you? I think this is like, there's going to be some recognizable names in here, like Cohere and others. But like, was there something about this? Because for me, it was more that framing issue with Boris Wirtz, who's actually a Canadian VC, who was in the issue. So there you go. talking about the idea that like science could be a moat, and like, you know, what's really cool, innovating at the atomic level. And that seemed like a really great way to talk about companies doing hard things with hardware and science and futuristic stuff.
This is a section to me where I feel like we sort of nailed it on timing, right? I think that right now, like the whole sector is very like rapidly realizing like in real time that software has changed, right? It is very, very, very hard to differentiate with software right now. The whole landscape is going to change around that. The way people are building companies is changing. The way people are investing in software is changing. But science, like deep tech, hardware, that is where the interesting things are going to be happening. That's where Canada has a lot of potential to really, really define itself. And so, like there's great companies in there, like, you know, Wabi's in there, Raquel Erdesen, you know, Cohere, Christian Weedbrook at Xanadu.
Photonics.
But really,
we got a lot of quantum in there.
Yeah, we got some quantum in there. But really, Boris's, you know, opening essay where he talks about science being the new moat, right? And why he's so, you know, bullish on, you know, deep tech founders, I think is a really, really important piece of thinking.
Yeah. And again, and like another space that Canada has traditionally played in that maybe we don't give ourselves credit for, haven't fully taken advantage of. And there's like a new pendulum swing ready for these companies to like do something about it. I think up next, don't hold me to this being the actual order, because this is being...
I know the order.
Oh, you know. Next up, I think, looking to Siri, we had the World Savers, right? And this one was cool because, again, it's emerged organically, where it's like, well, God, half of these companies are kind of like deep tech, but their ambition is making sure that planet Earth is a place that we get to continue to play on.
We were going to call it the hippies.
We're gonna call a lot of these things a lot of different things. Is there? I think maybe I know what yours is going to be, but I'm not going to name it. What for when it came to the kids out there saving the world? Was there a particular one where you're like, oh, that's really, really awesome, or indicative of what we were trying to achieve?
I think it's interesting. I think a lot of them, you know, I was skeptical about, right? And I think that kind of mirrors some of the skepticism that some of these companies are met with, right? When they're fundraising, of like, sure, you're going to save the world. Like, sure, you're going to like disrupt people's dependence on plastic or, you know, oil or whatever it is. And so it was ones that I had a lot of the conversations with the companies for this section. And I went in thinking that I wasn't going to be into it. And then they sort of talked me out of it. I think carbon capture is really interesting for Canada. I like kind of went in there calling bullshit on it. I'm like, is this really a thing? There's so much being done in that space. We have such an interesting history of it. Part of like the best thing for me about this whole issue is actually learning the backstory of Canadian strength on these things. There is a reason that companies are doing that, because we have a backstory of policy, because we have a backstory of scientific research that has really paved the way for this, right?
Because we have democracy still.
Yeah, well, yeah, for now. But yeah, so I thought that was really interesting. Like a lot of the work that people are doing in that space, you know, Diana from X Atoms, like never sort of ceases to amaze me. What she's doing with water purification, that's an incredible story. Yeah, there's lots in this one.
Yeah, X Atoms was another one for me where early on, when I was trying to find like North Stars for what would articulate ambition, like a 14-year-old traveling the world and having experience that they then decide to go become a scientific wonder kid, discover molecules, and use AI and quantum chemistry to like clean the world's water, not only for the benefit of everyone, but because in the places she was traveling to, she noted that in communities where there isn't clean water, the women of those communities are harder pressed. Is like you just circle that in a big red marker and say that there's something there. And Dana's going to be speaking at our town hall and maybe doing some actual, man, if you never hear from me again, know that I went out like a G.
We're going to do a science experiment.
We're going to do a science experiment. I'm going to drink hopefully what will be purified water. And if this is my last will and testament, know that I did so willingly, looking to Siri for approval.
One of the things about, Diana's story too, that I think is so important, like by telling these stories around the ambition, we also reveal other stories and other things that Canada needs to do, right? Yeah. She, came up with a way to purify water with light in her teens, right? She chose Canada as her home. She immigrated here. She does not yet have citizenship. She's been waiting on her residency status for years and years and years. Like this is a person that we should be hugging like with all of our force and being like, what do you need? How can we help you? Right. And so like, that's a story. How do we actually support people who come here to do incredible things? She told me that she like hides her age sometimes when she talks to investors, which she's like, I don't have to do in the States. In the States, they think I'm a wonder kid. Here, they're like, well,
did you actually?
Did your dad help you with that? You know, it's crazy.
Did your dad help you with your quantum chemistry at home? That's on the other end, this kind of relates to that. I really love, we have this, in terms of calling bullshit on things, that profile with Deep Sky and Phil DeLuna is so, I think, like educational in terms of the opportunity of the moment, why Canada is well positioned to do this, like not only like technologically, but like actually geographically really, really well. But then he has his own personal story in there of like wanting to get involved with this, going to academics and they'll be like, you're not good enough for this. And he's like, well, spite is a powerful motivator.
Oh, spoiler, man. Best last line of any story in the magazine is Phil DeLuna.
Absolutely. Yeah. Anything spite related is a really great closing line. Okay, let's keep moving on. Next one I think is, well, let me ask you, how would you define this category challengers section? Because I think this is the one that we went back and forth on probably the most.
Yeah, to me, like in my head, I call it the bigs.
The bigs.
The bigs. I don't know. Like I've been watching a lot of basketball lately.
Okay.
Right.
I call it the point guard.
Yeah, I don't know. Right. I think it's, you know, we did have a lot of it did start with companies that we admired and people that we thought were doing important things and building important companies here. And we were trying to figure out what is the through line between all of them. What's the commonality? And the commonality that we found was that they're all trying to redefine like a specific category. They're trying to own something, which I think, again, in this moment of time in Canada, where we're like, can we own something?
Yeah.
There are like, you know, I don't remember how many examples in this section of ones who can, right? We have a great opening essay by Vas Bednar, who, you know, is a huge expert on, you know, the Canadian competitive landscape or lack thereof, the things that are getting in the way, talking about what we're doing to hold ourselves back on this front. And then we go into stories of these companies that really, really could just create a whole new thing, right?
Yeah. I saw it more like some of these companies are some of the bigger companies, you know, and like I hope you get a sense from this, and when you read it, when you touch it in your hot little hands, get a sense that we didn't want this to just be a power list of the names that everyone knows, because that's really boring and dead. But the idea that, you know, we have companies that are like, I am literally trying to put nukes on the moon. I am trying to save the planet. I am trying to do something at the atomic level that has never been done before. And then we're going to see what happens after that. There are people in Canada who have very strong ambitions to make sure that healthcare works, to make sure that financial services aren't dumb and angering at every fundamental level. People that just make sure like that we have a way to do commerce that doesn't require Amazon. And for me, like, you know, you might not see that at a level or scale of ambition, but functionally day to day, when we talk about all the issues that Canada is dealing with and trying to solve for, could really, really help.
I think it goes the other way too, right? Because it's a lot of them are the companies you've probably heard the most about,
That's
right?
true.
Shopify's on there, Clio's on there, Jane's on there, Wealthsimple's on there, you know, among a collective that we call sort of like the new big eight, which is all the companies that are trying to disrupt the financial sector in Canada. Yeah. I think sometimes we get so used to hearing about their growth and their raises and their LinkedIn posts and things like that, that we forget that they're actually trying to do a massive thing, right? And like that was a conversation we had about Shopify of like, okay, are they trying to do something ambitious? Yeah, they are.
Yeah. Why is Shopify in this issue? It was something we talked about for quite some time, and I think we nailed it. Okay. Related to this, and I'm going to combine these together. We have this kind of like dual fun section of just like, hey, here's a bunch of cool people, places, things, expats, and products. Just like, did you know that there are a bunch of cool Canadians all around the world at these companies doing great things? And did you know that they're like Canadians made all this cool stuff? Do you want to, is there one that you can highlight? I think I know, because we talk about this separately in different meetings.
Well, there's for both of these sections, there was a real why for me. Like for expats, I feel like we don't talk about that enough. No. Like our real like people who leave here and do incredible things.
We get weird about it.
We're like, oh, they're gone. Like we won't think about that. There is so much talent and there are so many people who are really, really like driving change around the world. This could have been the whole issue too. Yeah. I think it's important to map those people. I think it's important for Canada to like talk about who those people are and keep track of them. And then maybe it'll be like, hey, should we bring them back when there's a big opportunity to do something? How do we actually conscript them into the cause, right? We have a lot of really smart people around the world. The one that I regret not getting on there was the guy who's doing the Moneyball, but for hockey. He works for Carolina something. I'm not a hockey girl. Yeah. He was really cool, but there's incredible people on the expat list. For products, the product one really came from something that happened at our first town hall, which is when somebody asked Toby Lukey of Shopify, what does he want Canada to be known for? Mm-hmm. And he said, if we could be known for one thing, I would want it to be craft. Yeah. Because if you build a beautiful product, you're going to succeed. And so that was the question we asked people. What is the most beautiful product? Yeah. And so we have we call it the product wall. We have this incredible product wall broken into categories. My favorite one is Lux Bio, which is a young woman from BC who had a science background, also liked to party a little bit. She was at a rave on a farm and there were glow sticks everywhere, and she was like helping clean up, and she's like, what is in these things, and is it bad that we've left so many on this working farm? Figured out what was in them, figured out that they were highly toxic. And even though we put them in our kids' loot bags, invented a new non-toxic glow stick, is taking over a factory in Hong Kong this September, has contracts with the Coast Guard, with NASA, is doing like incredible things. And like, my only regret is that she doesn't have any that she could send us for our party.
Well, this year, yes. Canada, we can have nice things, right? One last major section, and this is, when we look to future years, the next generation, which I think, again, you had mentioned Socratica early on as like an inspiration for just a perpetual vibes machine that they're building in Kitchener-Waterloo and around the world. We actually, I think, turned to each other at the same time during the Socratica Symposium, because there was a young woman on stage, Georgia Berg, who is a writer, because the symposium is a thing where anyone can demo what they're working on. It doesn't have to be technological, although I guess writing is an early form of technology. Again, this print, it's like the internet on pages. And we were like, we should get her to write about Socratica in the issue.
I was such a stalker. I like walked around that event just like getting all these like college kids' phone numbers.
Yes. And like giving out ours, being like, we will pay you money to do stuff for us.
That sounds terrible. Super writing
well.
Stuff.
Absolutely. Yes. And she wrote this wonderful, probably a different format from any other thing in the issue. It's like very close to a personal essay, but also like report from the field of being behind the scenes. This youth run demo night based upon this crazy community that required like pyrotechnic licenses, being held in a hockey arena. I think for me, you accuse me of being earnest at every available opportunity. This is one of the times where I really lean into that energy, because I think the idea that we have young people with strong ambitions and a section dedicated to those trying to capture, develop, support those ambitions is really, really cool. I think when we talk about like this feeling like a BetaKit thing, this section feels very BetaKit to me.
And I think that generationally, the shift that's happening there is that I was sort of like trained to like dislike earnestness, right? Of like, oh, that's not, we don't like that and we shouldn't be like that. The thing that I love about this new generation of builders is that they are earnest and they love each other and they're sort of cheesy, but they are like building stuff at a clip, and they are ambitious like no one I've ever met, and they can hold those things all together at the same time, and it's amazing.
Yeah, the kids are inspiring. And we both did the giant heart chain together with like.
I think I just turned around and took a picture of you doing it because that's where I draw the line.
Okay. Those are all the sections. We do have a special closing thing, which I'm not going to mention because no spoilers. But there is a legend referenced on the cover, and you'll understand why when you get to the back pages. I want to close this off with a couple rapid fire questions because this was an ambitious thing that we did. It's done. I'm speaking for our future selves. We are now celebrating with champagne somewhere in the future, in the middle of Toronto Tech Week. Looking back, what was the easiest thing about doing this?
Getting enough names to consider.
Like even still that moment of like, oh my God, what if there are no ambitious Canadians, or maybe we can't find them?
Yeah. I thought nobody would send us anything. I thought we wouldn't find enough. And like we could have done like an encyclopedia series. There's so many.
I guess maybe I thought it would be harder to kind of like vet that through or understand the why. But even when I dumbly just referenced it in a newsletter, and then like 2 days later had like 15 different like long emails from people being like, you should consider this person. I was like, oh, okay. I think we're going to have enough information. What was the hardest thing, or harder than expected?
Calling it, right? Like letting it be over. Like I still wake up in the middle of the night and I'm like, oh, what about these guys?
Yeah.
You know, we just did a big Western swing where, you know, we were both in Edmonton, Calgary, and Vancouver, although not all at the same time. And like every day I like met another company where I'm like, oh God, why don't we have them on there? Yeah. So I think that, right? I think like actually locking it in was really hard.
Yeah. Siri has this unique skill to like, if you let her leave the corner of your eye or your vision, she will come back with like, what about this new category? Or I have met and talked with 20 other companies. They should all be included. I really think my core value add to this whole project was being like, there will be issues next year and the year following.
You made me stop.
Yeah.
Although I think that I remember Satish said that to me at one point. He was like, I thought that the companies were going to be the thing that you guys fought about. And it's the thing we didn't fight about.
No.
Was who should be on the list is not something we fought about.
That was but to credit to us, I think it's because when we nailed how they get included, it was very clear that we had either didn't have something, or we needed to learn more, or we didn't run out of time. But there was definitely like pencils down. And it's like, no, the pencil never goes down. Ambition continues. Okay. For me, and I said this early, one of the things I was most anticipating about going through this process was about learning about people or companies or things that I didn't know about, which we totally mission accomplished did. For you, what was the most surprising thing you learned about Canadian tech through this process? And I don't mean like Canadian tech broadly. It could be like a company, a person, like a thing where you're just like, this is the juice. This is why we went on this journey to like know that this person existed.
Well, there's like a high level one and a specific one, I guess. I think that the main thing that I found amazing was the connections between the way all the stories related to each other, right? The fact that Myco Futures exists because of Catherine Hamuth, and, you know, Clio raised because of Shopify, and Jane raised because of Clio, and you know, a ton of the most exciting companies today all went through the Cansbridge Fellowship, right? Yeah. There's all these through lines of, you know, ideas and people and moments. You know, Deep Sky came out of Hopper, right? Like there's all these incredible stories that we don't know about how Canadian tech relates to Canadian tech. And I think that that's the thing that I want people to take away from this is like, we say we don't have, you know, PayPal mafias or things like that. We have incredible legends. Yeah. We have incredible stories of success begetting success, and we need to tell those stories louder. So I think that that's my high level one. I always come back to Rahul from Nordspace. And I think the like, who he is as a person, his experience as a Canadian, right? Like a lot of people on the list talked about their parents, right? And their parents coming to Canada and changing their lives, like people who had incredible jobs outside of Canada and came here and like ground it out so their kids could do things, and the way that they've carried that into what they do now. Like this kid looks after his younger brother and sister. His parents passed away. He employs like kids from his high school, and he's firing a rocket into space in August. Like he's a really, really incredible human. I'm glad he's in our country.
There are layers to the ambitions. For me, so we kind of talked about it before, just the idea like, okay, great. We made the Canada arm. What else? And then there's just like, we have a space program if we want it. If with the will and the energy, we can build like a full stack Canada in space circumstance. Was such a cool thing to learn, because even like some of the companies we had covered on BetaKit, we were aware of, maybe we had felt before that they were maybe outside of our space, whatever. And now there's just like this whole new segment of our coverage that we will be tracking, because we're like, we know who you are and what you're doing is really, really cool. And then I skipped over it because I was like teaser at the end. But when you get to the end and you read about, or you read the words of the legend, I'm not even going to say his name, you will, I think, recognize what you were talking about in terms of the connectivity. Meeting the person that like taught Michael Litz, that taught my old boss, Mike Lazaridis, and then hearing just quotes days after days. It was such an enjoyable experience just going through that whole thing.
And the format of that last piece that we're talking about, it's called What I Learned. And that to me is like a callback to a magazine. I used to like Esquire magazine. Like that's where that came from. Esquire used to have these What I Learned things all the time that I grew up with. Yeah. And it's kind of like an interesting precursor to how we talk on the internet, right? There's these little sort of vignette statements that they sort of developed as a style, which I think works so well with what this person has to share. And I think people are going to get a lot out of it.
Yeah. And Esquire did sports coverage.
I don't know. It was like a men's mag.
Okay. Last, most important question, because hopefully through this episode we have whet everyone's appetite. How do you get a most ambitious issue?
Well, part of the joy of this for me and like the tactile nature of it is that the first way you're going to be able to get them is we're actually going to hand them out, like the physical print copies, at the first ever Toronto Tech Week. And Toronto Tech Week is also about ambition. It's also about a moment in time. And I think there's something, really special about having that tactile moment where the first place anybody's going to get one is when they walk in the door for our town hall on Monday the 23rd, and we're going to put it right in their hands. We're going to have them at a number of Toronto Tech Week events.
Mm-hmm. So if you are like watching this or listening to this on a Monday and you're like, oh my God, town hall's in 30 minutes, I haven't put on pants. There are other opportunities during Tech Week when you can get the episode. Yeah.
I'm hoping that they're going to be the hot commodity, a bit of a collector's item. We're going to be doing obviously a digital version as well that we'll be dropping that week. And so there'll be lots of ways to get it. And we're excited for everybody to see it.
Yeah. Possibly going to betakit.com might help if you are not at Toronto Tech Week and you want to digitally consume this really cool print thing. Okay. Because we are not in the future and we actually have stuff to do to get to when this episode drops, I think we should wrap that there. And then I guess, Siri, thank you for coming on the BetaKit podcast. Finally, God, it took like a year and a half.
I know.
And talking with me about ambition.
I'm excited. I can't wait for everybody to see it. Get ready to do the next one.
Planning begins July 1st.